In the late autumn of 1894, the town of Barrows Hollow, Illinois, slipped into a slumber that would last 3 full days. And not a soul there would ever speak of dreams again. When the mail rider approached on November 5th, he found the settlement silent, its homes dim, its doors open, its fires dead. Chickens wandered freely through kitchens, their claws ticking against floorboards. Horses stood motionless in their stalls, as if waiting for a command that had never come. And the people, hundreds of them, lay asleep where they had fallen, some slumped over laundry basins, some sprawled on porches with shoes half-tied, some collapsed in the middle of the road, with sacks of flour burst beside them like pale dust clouds. But there was one man who stood awake among them, not just one. He stared at the rider with cracked, sleepless eyes and whispered, over and over, like a prayer that had melted into madness, "We weren't alone in our sleep." Barrows Hollow sat in a forgotten crease of central Illinois low prairie, soft soil, and a sky that always seemed too large for the world beneath it. The land was good for wheat, but little else. When autumn rolled around, the stalks grew so tall and thick that wind made them hiss like distant whispering voices. Travelers often remarked that the prairie around Barrows Hollow felt restless. The ground trembled after storms. Corners of fields sagged as if settling, and wells dug deeper than 30 feet struck a layer of black, glistening clay the locals refused to speak about. The nearest railway stop was 20 miles away. No newspaper ever mentioned the town. Maps rarely bothered marking it. To live in Barrows Hollow was to live in a kind of muffled world, a place where time felt slowed, softened, like footsteps on wet soil. Despite the isolation, Barrows Hollow wasn't unfriendly. The residents were simple farm families, old stock Americans who worked from moonrise to sundown. Their hands were rough, their voices low, and their habits unchanging. There was Martha Delling, the woman everyone trusted. She carried bread to neighbors when sickness hit and read from her weathered Bible before meals. She often said the prairie reminded her of a vast, sleeping thing, a comment most dismissed as poetic nonsense. Elias Rudd, the mill foreman, was a skeptic by nature. Nothing troubled him except the mill wheel's constant rattling, which he claimed was just the old thing settling. His workers disagreed. The wheel sometimes stopped without reason, then lurched forward as if woken. Young Thomas Hawley, the schoolteacher, had the strangest manner of them all. He never shouted, never scolded. His voice floated through the classroom like dust in a sunbeam. Some said he spoke like a man afraid someone was always listening. And then there was Silas Pritchard, the outsider, a tall, thin railway surveyor hired to chart the land for a possible new spur. He arrived that October with 2 notebooks, 3 pencils, and a quietness no one could quite read. His boots were always muddy, though no one ever saw him walking through the marshes or fields. Silas lodged above the mercantile shop and spent his evenings at the edge of town, staring toward the wheat fields as twilight bled into night. He told the townsfolk he was studying soil structure. He never explained why. By late October, the atmosphere around Barrows Hollow began to shift, not in any way the eye could track, but in the way nature seemed to hold its breath. The wheat fields were harvested early that year, yet the ground remained strangely warm beneath the stubble, as though heat pooled just below the surface. Housecats refused to walk across the fields. Dogs barked at the dirt, not the horizon. And the mill wheel, which had grown the same old rhythm for decades, began to stutter like a heart skipping beats. Some townsfolk noticed the nights growing unnervingly quiet. No crickets, no wind, only the faint, steady hum of something distant, too deep to be a storm, too soft to be a machine. It sounded like breathing. Then came the first sign that something was profoundly wrong. I slept too deeply, the first day on November 3rd. Martha Delling woke before dawn to the smell of burnt metal. Her kettle had boiled dry. The stovetop glowed faintly with exhausted heat. And yet she had no memory of lighting a fire at all. She later told her neighbor, "It felt like I was pulled under, as if the bed were a mouth." She laughed it off, embarrassed. But by midday, 3 families reported the same unnatural sleep hours unaccounted for, dreams unfelt, limbs heavy. That same afternoon, Thomas Holly dismissed his class early. He complained of a pressure behind the eyes, as though something were pushing him gently into unconsciousness. He wrote a note in the school ledger before locking the door. "Something is wrong. The children blink too slowly. I worry the air is thickening." Meanwhile, Elias Rudd and his crew struggled to keep the mill wheel turning. It froze twice in 1 hour, not from ice, not from jammed gears, but as though the entire building had forgotten to move. Elias wrote the following in his personal ledger that evening. Ledger, November 3rd, 1894. Strange quiet after sundown. Even the river sounds tired. The air feels heavy. Hard to stay awake. Dreamt of knocking from under the fields. Thought it was rain at first dot, but it was slow. Throughout that night, the sheep in the east pasture bleated endlessly, as though warning something away, or calling something closer. The second morning brought a deeper unease. Parents awoke to find their children still sleeping, bloodless and pale but breathing normally. No amount of shaking, calling, or cold water could rouse them. Some slept with their eyes slightly open, pupils trembling. The doctor, Henry Bloss, performed examinations and found no illness. Pulse steady, breathing normal, but all minds inert, not unconscious, not dreaming. Simply gone silent, neighbors gathered in the churchyard, murmuring in low tones. Rain threatened on the horizon, yet not a drop fell. Clouds hung motionless, as if pinned to the sky. Silas Pritchard moved through the crowd. Without speaking, he carried both of his notebooks that day. He walked the perimeter of the wheat fields again and again, tapping the earth with the heel of his boot, listening. He looked ill, unshaven. His eyes ringed with exhaustion. At sundown, the church bell rang once. No hand touched the rope. No wind moved through the steeple. Everyone heard it. No one admitted they had. That night, nearly the entire population of Barrows Hollow struggled to remain awake. Past dusk, some fell asleep over stew bowls. Some collapsed in chairs. Others never made it inside before falling into the dirt. Asleep mid-step, and the hum beneath the town, the one faint as breath, grew stronger. Near midnight, Silas Pritchard burst into the mercantile, startling the sleeping owner. He demanded lamp oil, 3 candles, and a map of the county. His hands shook as he paid. He told the owner, "There's a pattern to the way the fields sink. They're hollows, not natural. Something's moving under there." The owner stared, confused, but when he asked Silas what he meant, Silas only whispered, "I can hear it turning." He didn't sleep that night. He paced. He scribbled. He muttered to himself about breathing places, subsurface chambers, and rhythms older than the prairie. No one knows what he discovered between midnight and dawn, but neighbors later recalled seeing lamp light flicker through his window at every hour. The man never sitting, never resting, always standing like someone guarding themselves from falling asleep. And then came November 5th, the day the town fell completely silent. Dawn broke in a pale, sickly streak over the horizon. Mist clung to the ground, rolling in slow currents like breath escaping from the earth itself. The mail rider, Calvin Merritt, approached the town from the south road. His horse hesitated at the boundary, snorting, ears pinned back. Calvin had to coax him forward. He entered Barrows Hollow to find bodies lying everywhere, men, women, children, all collapsed in natural positions, as if overtaken by a single, irresistible wave of exhaustion. Every face peaceful, every chest rising and falling, every dream locked away. And then he saw Silas. The surveyor stood in the center of the road, rigid as a fence post, eyes wide and impossibly dry, as though tears had evaporated before falling. Calvin rode closer. Silas didn't blink, didn't move. The rider asked him what had happened. Silas whispered, "They're not dreaming their own dreams." Calvin dismounted. He shook Silas. He waved a hand in front of his face. Silas continued, trembling violently. Something called them downward. All of them. Every last one. I stayed awake because I heard it before it reached me. The humming. The pulling. It wanted us all. And then Silas looked at the ground beneath his feet and whispered, "It's still here." Calvin checked the mill next. Following Silas's pointing finger, the wheel had stopped. Mid-turn. Water trickled through the paddles without sound. Inside, the workers lay slumped over sacks of grain or sprawled on the stone floor. A lantern burned dangerously low beside one man's hand. The flames reflected in puddles of spilled wheat, shining like stars dropped from the sky. One worker had carved a message into the... That same afternoon, Thomas Holly dismissed his class early. He complained of a pressure behind the eyes, as though something were pushing him gently into unconsciousness. He wrote a note in the school ledger before locking the door. "Something is wrong. The children blink too slowly. I worry the air is thickening." Meanwhile, Elias Rudd and his crew struggled to keep the mill wheel turning. It froze twice in 1 hour, not from ice, not from jammed gears, but as though the entire building had forgotten to move. Elias wrote the following in his personal ledger that evening. Ledger, November 3rd, 1894. Strange quiet after sundown. Even the river sounds tired. The air feels heavy. Hard to stay awake. Dreamt of knocking from under the fields. Thought it was rain at first. But it was slow. Throughout that night, the sheep in the east pasture bleated endlessly, as though warning something away, or calling something closer. The second morning brought a deeper unease. Parents awoke to find their children still sleeping, bloodless and pale but breathing normally. No amount of shaking, calling, or cold water could rouse them. Some slept with their eyes slightly open, pupils trembling. The doctor, Henry Bloss, performed examinations and found no illness. Pulse steady, breathing normal, but all minds inert, not unconscious, not dreaming. Simply gone silent. Neighbors gathered in the churchyard, murmuring in low tones. Rain threatened on the horizon. Yet not a drop fell. Clouds hung motionless, as if pinned to the sky. Silas Pritchard moved through the crowd. Without speaking, he carried both of his notebooks that day. He walked the perimeter of the wheat fields again and again, tapping the earth with the heel of his boot, listening. He looked ill, unshaven. His eyes ringed with exhaustion. At sundown, the church bell rang once. No hand touched the rope. No wind moved through the steeple. Everyone heard it. No one admitted they had. That night, nearly the entire population of Barrows Hollow struggled to remain awake. Past dusk, some fell asleep over stew bowls. Some collapsed in chairs. Others never made it inside before falling into the dirt. Asleep mid-step, and the hum beneath the town, the one faint as breath, grew stronger. Near midnight, Silas Pritchard burst into the mercantile, startling the sleeping owner. He demanded lamp oil, 3 candles, and a map of the county. His hands shook as he paid. He told the owner, "There's a pattern to the way the fields sink. They're hollows, not natural. Something's moving under there." The owner stared, confused, but when he asked Silas what he meant, Silas only whispered, "I can hear it turning." He didn't sleep that night. He paced. He scribbled. He muttered to himself about breathing places, subsurface chambers, and rhythms older than the prairie. No one knows what he discovered between midnight and dawn, but neighbors later recalled seeing lamp light flicker through his window at every hour. The man never sitting, never resting, always standing like someone guarding themselves from falling asleep. And then came November 5th, the day the town fell completely silent. Dawn broke in a pale, sickly streak over the horizon. Mist clung to the ground, rolling in slow currents like breath escaping from the earth itself. The mail rider, Calvin Merritt, approached the town from the south road. His horse hesitated at the boundary, snorting, ears pinned back. Calvin had to coax him forward. He entered Barrows Hollow to find bodies lying everywhere. Men, women, children, all collapsed in natural positions, as if overtaken by a single, irresistible wave of exhaustion. Every face peaceful, every chest rising and falling, every dream locked away. And then he saw Silas. The surveyor stood in the center of the road, rigid as a fence post, eyes wide and impossibly dry, as though tears had evaporated before falling. Calvin rode closer. Silas didn't blink, didn't move. The rider asked him what had happened. Silas whispered, "They're not dreaming their own dreams." Calvin dismounted. He shook Silas. He waved a hand in front of his face. Silas continued, trembling violently. Something called them downward. All of them. Every last one. I stayed awake because I heard it before it reached me. The humming. The pulling. It wanted us all. And then Silas looked at the ground beneath his feet and whispered, "It's still here." Calvin checked the mill next. Following Silas's pointing finger, the wheel had stopped. Mid-turn. Water trickled through the paddles without sound. Inside, the workers lay slumped over sacks of grain or sprawled on the stone floor. Dreams turning violent. Something is calling from below. Silas closed the notebook with a shudder. His lantern flame guttered again. As if a long breath passed through the room, he whispered, "This land is not empty." Hours after Calvin escaped the sleeping town, he arrived at the nearest sheriff's outpost. Pale and shaking. Sheriff Abram Harlow listened with deepening disbelief, but the fear in Calvin's voice was genuine enough that Harlow summoned a physician, 3 deputies, and a cart full of supplies. By early afternoon, they arrived at Barrows Hollow. The sheriff smelled the silence immediately. That strange, suffocating quiet that thickened the air like humidity. His boots sank slightly into the soil with each step, as though the ground had softened overnight. The deputies lifted the sleeping townsfolk gently, checking pulses, confirming steady breathing, examining eyes and mouths and limbs. None showed any sign of illness. None bore injuries or marks. None responded to shouts, pinches, light or cold water. It was as though consciousness itself had been taken from them. Dr. Henry Bloss, who had slept through the town's collapse, was found lying on his office floor, surrounded by medical instruments. His spectacles were crooked, and his hand still held a rolled bandage. Sheriff Harlow muttered, "What kind of sickness lays a whole town low at once?" Calvin, exhausted, gestured toward Silas. "Ask him." Silas stood exactly where Calvin had left him. He looked as though he had not blinked in hours. Sheriff Harlow approached cautiously. "Son," he said, "you awake? You with us?" Silas turned his head slowly, too slowly, as if forcing his neck to move against some invisible resistance. He murmured, "I stayed awake so I could hear it better." The sheriff exchanged a look with Calvin. "What did you hear?" He pressed. Silas pointed toward the fields, his finger trembling. A voice, but not with words. A voice that moves the earth. A voice that wanted the town to join it. Harlow frowned. "You saying someone drugged these people?" "No," Silas whispered. "Not someone. Something. It reached up from the ground and called them down. Their minds went first, then their bodies. Silas suddenly grabbed Harlow's coat, his voice cracking. If they sleep long enough, they won't wake at all. The sheriff had to pry his hands loose. Sheriff Harlow and his deputies followed Silas toward the wheat fields. The sun was low now, casting long skeletal shadows across the ground. As they reached the first sunken patch of earth, Harlow's breath caught. The depression pulsed, rising and falling with slow, deliberate rhythm, like breathing, like something enormous beneath the soil inhaled and exhaled. Deputy Reed muttered a prayer. Deputy Carmichael stepped back, hand trembling on his revolver. Sheriff Harlow knelt, pressing his palm against the dirt. It was warm, not just warm, feverish. And beneath the warmth was a vibration, faint but undeniably present, like the thrum of distant machinery. Harlow stood sharply. "What's under here?" Silas answered. "A chamber. A vast one. Natural, maybe. But something inside it is moving." Deputy Carmichael scoffed, though his voice shook. "You saying there's some kind of creature under our boots?" Silas shook his head. "I don't know, but it's older than the prairie, older than the farms, older than anything living on this land." Today, the sheriff felt sweat bead on his brow. He could not deny the pulsing beneath him. He could not deny the warmth. He could not deny that every living soul in the town lay unconscious. Something had happened here, something vast and unseen. He made his decision. "We're bringing in state authorities. We're sealing this town off." But deep beneath the ground, as though hearing his words, the hum surged, a deep, resonant wave that rippled through the soil like a warning. Back at Silas's room above the mercantile, Sheriff Harlow searched through the man's belongings. What he found made his blood run cold. Several pages of Silas's secret notebook had been torn out. The remaining entries were crude sketches of underground tunnels, twisting, looping structures that seemed impossible in scale and depth. On one page, Silas had drawn a spiral, huge, layered, ancient, with a single note beneath. "Not man-made." Another page showed dozens of small circles clustered around a larger central void. "Breathing vents." Silas had written, "The land exhales." And then Harlow found the most disturbing entry. "If the chamber wakes fully, the land will open. Sleep is its lure. It feeds on dreams first. Then it takes the dreamer." The sheriff closed the notebook slowly, as though afraid the pages might move on their own. He turned to Calvin. "We need more help than I can bring. Ride to Springfield. Bring the health board, the governor, anyone who'll listen." Calvin swallowed hard. What if they don't wake up before I get back? As night settled over Barrows Hollow, the deputies stationed themselves around the sleeping townsfolk, lanterns casting nervous halos of light across the unmoving bodies. Though no wind blew, the lantern flames flickered constantly. The soil beneath them trembled, rhythmically, not violently, not erratically, but purposefully. Deputy Carmichael whispered, "Feels like we're standing on a giant chest. Feels like it's breathing right through us." Silas sat on the church steps, head in hands, murmuring, "It's almost done, almost ready to wake us all." Sheriff Harlow stood beside him. "Wake us to what?" Silas slowly looked up, eyes hollow. "To whatever dreams in the dark beneath these fields." And then, somewhere beyond the wheat stubble, the soil rippled visibly, as if something massive rolled beneath it. Deputy Reed dropped his lantern in terror. The flame hissed out. When it struck the warm earth, the darkness deepened. And the hum grew stronger. By dawn of November 6, 1894, the story of Barrows Hollow had already traveled far beyond the prairie roads. Calvin Merritt reached Springfield shortly after midnight. His horse collapsed minutes after arrival, trembling with exhaustion. Calvin shouted through the doors of the health board until lanterns lit the windows and officials emerged. horrified by his description of an entire town asleep. By sunrise, a full investigative entourage approached Barrows Hollow. 3 doctors, 2 state marshals, the county coroner, 4 deputies from neighboring districts, and a geologist named Dr. Luther Kincaid, who specialized in subterranean formations. They arrived expecting plague. They expected mass poisoning. They expected anything that could be explained through reason. What they found instead was a silence so deep it almost swallowed their footsteps. The investigators stepped into Barrows Hollow and froze. The morning sun glinted off rows of sleeping bodies lying exactly as they had fallen the day before, some in doorways, some in mid-stride, some clasping tools or bowls or children. The marshals exchanged uneasy looks. One muttered, "No disease acts this way." Dr. Kincaid knelt beside a sleeping woman, pressing 2 fingers to her neck. "Pulse steady," he murmured, breathing unlabored, muscles relaxed, almost like he hesitated, like she simply fell into a natural sleep. Another doctor checked several children. All healthy, all warm, all unreachable. The coroner, examining the stiffened flower on the road, whispered, "This isn't death, but neither is it rest." And then he noticed Silas, standing alone. Unblinking, like a soldier who had survived a battle no one else remembered. The officials approached Silas cautiously. His boots were muddy, his clothes rumpled. His neck twitched with the slightest tremor every few seconds. Dr. Kincaid greeted him. "Mr. Pritchard, we've been told you're awake." Silas gave a thin, humorless smile. "I don't sleep anymore. It tries to pull me under. Every time I close my eyes, it?" The coroner asked. Silas looked to the wheat fields, where the soil rose and fell in a slow rhythm that only the brave dared witness. "There's something beneath us," he whispered. "A chamber. A hollow, call it what you will. It draws breath like a living thing. And these people," he swept a trembling hand toward the unconscious townsfolk, "they heard the call, but not with their ears." Dr. Kincaid exchanged looks with the marshals. "Calvin said you kept notes," the geologist said softly. "May I see them?" Silas hesitated. His exhaustion showed in the wavering look in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. He handed Dr. Kincaid the secret notebook, the one filled with sketches of spirals, tunnels, and patterns in the earth that no surveyor would reasonably record. The geologist flipped through the pages. At first, his expression remained politely skeptical. Then his brow furrowed. His breath slowed. His lips parted slightly in disbelief. These are not natural formations," he murmured. "They resemble chambers, but their symmetry." He swallowed hard. "Nothing in Illinois geology matches this." Silas whispered, "They're older, deep as the first stories this land ever held." One marshal scowled. "That's enough ghost tales," he snapped. "We need facts, not fantasies." But Dr. Kincaid's fingers trembled on the pages. "Sometimes," he murmured, "fantasies are just truths we lack the courage to face." As the sun rose higher, investigators noted something strange. The sleeping townsfolk began to twitch. Fingers curled, tongues moved against their teeth. Eyes trembled beneath closed lids. Dr. Bloss, having been awakened earlier by the deputies, examined the movements with cautious dread. "They're dreaming," he murmured. "But something's wrong. Their pupils are reacting to sounds in the environment. That shouldn't be possible while unconscious." One of the state doctors leaned in close to a young boy. The boy's breath quickened. So did that of the woman beside him. And the old man slumped against a fence. And the toddler in her mother's arms. Every sleeping soul responded to the vibration. It was as if the unseen presence beneath the earth had tied invisible strings to their minds. Dr. Kincaid whispered, "It's communicating with them." Silas corrected him. Voice thin as paper. No, it's feeding on them. By early afternoon, the investigators moved toward the wheat fields, where the ground had been seen rising and falling. They found 6 depressions exactly as Silas described, evenly spaced, as though arranged with deliberate intention. But at the 7th depression, something else appeared. A crack, a thin, dark fissure running 20 feet across the earth. Barely wide enough for a hand, but far too deep to see the bottom. Warm air drifted from it. Not a breeze, not wind, a steady, gentle warmth like the exhale of something vast. Dr. Kincaid knelt beside it. His lantern flame, held close, flickered toward the crack rather than away. As though pulled. He whispered, "The ground. It's breathing inward, drawing air down." One marshal spat in fear. "That ain't possible." But Dr. Kincaid ignored him. He leaned closer, listening. Then his face went pale. "I hear something," he murmured. "What?" Harlow asked. Kincaid swallowed. "A heartbeat." Deputy Carmichael backed away immediately. Silas trembled violently, gripping his hair with both hands. "It's waking," he whispered. "The chamber beneath. The thing inside it. It's waking." The marshals exchanged looks, unsure whether to treat Silas as a witness or a madman. Then something unexpected happened. The crack in the earth widened a few inches, not with the violence of an earthquake, but slowly, like lips parting in sleep. Warm air pulsed out again. The hum grew louder. And far in the distance, somewhere deep below, something knocked once against the hollow. Earth. The investigators froze. No bird cried. No wind stirred. Only that single knock echoed faintly beneath their feet. A knock that seemed to travel through the soil like a ripple. Dr. Bloss whispered, "God help us. Something's alive down there." The dreamers SB back in town. The first conscious reactions from the sleepers emerged. Dr. Elise Ward, one of the state physicians, noticed a woman whispering faintly through unmoving lips. She knelt close. "What is she saying?" Harlow asked. Dr. Ward listened carefully, face draining of color. "She is repeating a single phrase," the doctor said. "What phrase?" Ward closed her eyes, then repeated it aloud. "Let us down. Let us down. Let us down." Sheriff Harlow steadied himself. Other whispers soon followed, murmured through barely parted lips, carried softly by unconscious tongues. "They're waiting. It's calling. Fall deeper, deeper. Open the door. Not ours. Not ours. They're hungry." Doctors moved from body to body, listening. All murmured variations of the same messages, please. Invites, warnings, assurances, all spoken in tones that resembled neither fear nor pain. The dreamers sounded willing. As if they longed to descend into the earth. Sheriff Harlow whispered, "They're answering something in their dreams." Dr. Bloss corrected him quietly. "They're answering something that doesn't belong in dreams at all." Faced with the widening fissure, the breathing earth, and the chorus of unconscious voices echoing the same plea, Dr. Kincaid made a grim announcement. "We must investigate the chamber below," he said. "If we don't understand what causes this sleep, we can't reverse it." Sheriff Harlow stared at him as though the man had lost his mind. "You want to climb into that?" Dr. Kincaid's voice wavered with fear, but not uncertainty. "A geological formation that produces rhythmic vibration, warmth, airflow, and affects human consciousness. This is no cave. It is something completely unknown. It may be the key to waking these people." Silas shook violently, backing away from the fissure. "No, you don't go down. Not you, not anyone. That chamber wasn't meant for daylight. It was meant to stay sealed." The marshal scoffed. "You sound like a superstitious fool." "No," Silas said. "I sound like the only man here who's heard it whisper." The marshals ignored him, and then the ground shifted. A low, Seismic groan rumbled through the prairie. The fissure widened another half-foot. Opening like a mouth yawning toward him, Kincaid stumbled backward, lantern nearly slipping from his hand. Silas screamed, "It knows you're there." Dr. Kincaid stared into the widening darkness. For one fraction of a second, he saw something move far below, not a shape, not a figure, but a shadow within a shadow, drifting like something that floated rather than crawled. He dropped the lantern. It fell into darkness. No sound. Returned. Not even a distant clatter. The lantern simply vanished. As though swallowed. Dr. Kincaid whispered, "It's bottomless." The ground trembled once more, long, slow, and deep, like the exhale of a Titanic being beneath the surface. All across the town, the sleepers twitched violently, their whispered phrases aligned into one unified chant, spoken in hundreds of overlapping voices. "No more light. No more light. No more light." The investigators froze. The wheat field swayed without wind. The fissure pulsed like a living wound. Silas collapsed to his knees, clutching his ears. "It doesn't want to be seen," he sobbed. "It doesn't want us awake. It wants us sleeping forever." As the chant of the unconscious rose in eerie unison, Sheriff Harlow felt something he had not felt since childhood. Pure, helpless terror. Something beneath the town was stirring. Something ancient, immense, and aware. And they had just knocked on its door. By the time the sun reached its highest point on November 6th, the small fissure in the wheat fields had widened into something unmistakably deliberate. Not torn, broken open by accident, but parted. Like a seam coming undone, warm air drifted from it in steady pulses, slow, patient, almost gentle. Every time the warm breath rose, the lantern flames trembled toward the opening. The hum beneath the ground deepened until the investigators no longer heard it. They felt it inside their ribs, pulsing in rhythm with their own heartbeats. The unconscious townsfolk twitched at each vibration. Some murmured, some smiled faintly. A few began crying without waking, tears leaking down temples as if mourning something only their dreaming minds could see. The marshals, who had mocked the supernatural hours before, now avoided the fissure entirely. No one wanted to stand close. No one wanted to hear the breathing. No one wanted to acknowledge the truth rising from below. But they could not ignore it much longer. Something beneath Barrows Hollow was stirring, and the ground itself seemed eager to help it rise. Dr. Kincaid recovered from his failed descent attempt. The doctors spread through town taking notes on the sleeper's condition. Dr. Bloss knelt beside Thomas Holla, the schoolteacher. Hale's breath came deep and slow, unnaturally slow. Each inhale seemed to last a full 10 seconds. Dr. Bloss touched Hale's wrist. His blood pulsed with perfect rhythm, slower than normal, but steady. But then something strange occurred. As Bloss leaned closer, Hale's lips parted. A whisper escaped, quiet as a thread of smoke. "It's almost through." Dr. Bloss froze. "What is?" he asked softly. Holly did not answer. Instead, his breathing shifted, syncing perfectly with the hum beneath the ground, each inhale timed to each pulse from below. Bloss rose, shaken, across town. Other sleep twitches became more violent. A mother clutched her child. Farmer dug his nails into the dirt. A teenager's teeth chattered, though he was warm to the touch. Dr. Elise Ward, listening closely to another dreamer, documented the following in her notes. Ward's field notes, November 6th, 2:11 p.m. The sleepers speak in fragmented messages. They describe being pulled downward or walking through soil as light as water. They describe a voice, not a human voice guiding them. The tone in their whispers is reverent. Reverent, the word hung heavy in the air. It meant the dreamers were not resisting whatever reached for them. They were going willingly. Sheriff Harlow felt a coldness in his bones that had nothing to do with the weather. As the investigators neared the end of their first full day in Barrows Hollow, something unexpected began to occur. The awake began to tire. First, Dr. Ward yawned. At first she dismissed it, hours of work, stress, the cold. But then Deputy Reed swayed on his feet and muttered, "Feels like my bones want to lie down." Sheriff Harlow snapped at him, "Stand straight. Reed, you're not one of them." But Reed barely heard. His eyelids drooped, his jaw slackened, his legs trembled. Silas lurched forward, grabbing Reed's arm. "Don't you dare fall asleep," he hissed. "If you fall asleep here, you won't come back up." Reed tried to step away, but his legs buckled. He collapsed onto his knees. Deputy Carmichael, not wet, not muddy. Just darker. As though something beneath was reaching upward, hungry for his sinking weight. Carmichael recoiled. "Sheriff!" Harlow and Carmichael dragged Reed away with force they didn't know they had. His unconscious body was heavy as iron. The soil where he had knelt stayed darker, pulsing faintly. Breathing. Dr. Ward swallowed hard. "Whatever this is," she whispered, "it spreads through proximity. The longer we stay here, the more vulnerable we become." Silas nodded. "Sleep is the bait. And we're standing in the trap." The deepening accessory at dusk. The investigators gathered near the 7th hollow. Something had changed. The crack in the earth had grown into a fissure. Nearly a yard across, soil crumbled gradually. Into its widening throat, warm vapor rose in slow, steady breaths. And then they heard it, something moving below. Not the gentle shifting of dirt. Not the scrape of stone. Wind. A dragging sound. A sound like a vast weight gliding over earth. Slow but deliberate. A sound that vibrated through their teeth. Dr. Kincaid's face lost all color. "That's no cave formation," he whispered. Sheriff Harlow stepped to the edge, lantern lifted with trembling hand. He called into the fissure, "Who's down there?" "Only warm air," answered. Then a noise. Tap. Soft. Measured. Purposeful. Dr. Bloss whispered, "That's the same knock I heard earlier." Silas shuddered violently. "It's responding," he hissed. "It knows we're here. It hears our voices. It feels our footsteps." The marshal stepped back. No one dared speak. Then, without warning, the ground quivered. The fissure widened another foot, and something far below exhaled. A long, slow, wet sound of air moving through a place that had not been touched by daylight in thousands of years. Lantern flames flickered violently. Deputy Carmichael shouted, "We need to get out of here." But the investigators could not leave, not yet, because something else was happening. The dreamers were beginning to hum. Every unconscious man, woman, and child in Barrows Hollow let out a soft, rhythmic hum, matching the pulse of the living earth beneath them. A chorus of dreamers and something below. Silas clasped his head, sinking to his knees. "It's calling them deeper," he groaned. "They're not dreaming of falling, they're dreaming of being welcomed." Sheriff Harlow whispered, "God help us." By full dark, the air around Barrows Hollow changed. Wind rose from below, not cold, but warm and moist, carrying the scent of deep minerals and something faintly organic. Dr. Ward described it as like the breath of an animal that's been sleeping for centuries. The wheat fields rustled, though no surface wind blew. Not a single leaf moved on the trees, yet the wheat swayed violently, as though stirred by a current rising from beneath. Silas staggered backward. "It's pushing air up now," he said. "That means it's almost ready. It's almost surfaced." Sheriff Harlow gripped his rifle. "What's coming up, Silas?" Silas laughed once a dry, broken sound. "You still don't understand," he whispered. "Nothing is coming up. It's pulling us down." And then the investigators noticed something horrifying. The soil at their feet was shifting. Not collapsing. Not giving way, but moving under their boots. softening, loosening. Almost like for why I need. As if preparing to swallow. Dr. Kincaid stumbled. The soil structure, it's losing cohesion. This isn't natural. This isn't even geological. This is, he didn't finish because at that moment, the ground sank 3 inches beneath them in a single slow motion, not collapsing. Just lowering, a gentle invitation downward. Sheriff Harlow shouted, "Back! Back, get to the road." They scrambled. Boots slipping, breaths heaving, lanterns swinging wildly. The earth rose again behind them as they fled, closing slightly, as though a jaw snapping shut. The doctor, who didn't make it. Ward turned to count the group and screamed. Dr. Luther Kincaid was missing. His rope coil lay on the ground, near the fissure. His lantern was gone, and in the dirt, not footprints, but a trail. As though he had been dragged downward, not across. Sheriff Harlow ran back to the fissure, screaming Kincaid's name. Only warm air answered. A long pulse rose from the depths, stirring his hair, and a faint, sickening sound echoed upward, like someone exhaling underwater. Dr. Bloss seized Harlow's coat, pulling him back. "He's gone." Bloss whispered, "We can't help him. We can't even reach him." But Silas looked into the fissure with hollow eyes. "He's not dead," he murmured. "Not yet. He's dreaming below the soil. He's not dreaming alone." By midnight, the investigators began falling victim to the same sleep that had overtaken the town. Dr. Bloss collapsed first, face first into the dirt. Deputy Reed went next. Then Carmichael swayed, slurring his words before slumping onto a porch beside the dreamers. Dr. Ward fought harder, but her eyelids fluttered uncontrollably. Her pencil dropped from her hand. Her knees buckled. "Sheriff." Harlow caught her before she hit the ground. She murmured a single phrase before losing consciousness. "The chamber wants us to join the others." Sheriff Harlow shook her desperately. "Wake up. Dr. Ward, wake up." But her breath slowed to match the hum beneath the earth. Silas and Harlow were the last awake, too exhausted. Terrified men standing against a force older than the prairie itself. And then, just past 1 in the morning, the soil in the wheat fields lifted. Not rose, lifted, as though something massive beneath pressed upward. Sheriff Harlow whispered, "Oh Lord." A bulge formed in the field, a perfect, smooth dome of earth rising from below. Silas staggered backward. "It's surfacing," he breathed. "It's coming for us." The dome cracked, soil spilled outward, warm vapor hissed upward. And deep below the rumble, through layers of earth and darkness, something made a sound Harlow would never forget. A slow, drawn-out inhale, and then a voice, not spoken, not heard through air. But felt, a whisper inside the bones. "Sleep." Sheriff Harlow collapsed instantly. Silas remained standing. Barely. His eyes bloodshot, his body trembling violently, his jaw clenched in desperate refusal. He whispered back, "No." The voice answered, "Join." Silas screamed, clutching his skull, but he did not fall. He alone remained awake as the dome of earth exhaled and the fields trembled. And beneath the town of Barrows Hollow, something impossibly old began to rise toward the world it had slept beneath. For centuries, Silas Pritchard had survived the second night of Barrows Hollow awake, but not unharmed. His voice was broken. His eyes were raw. His hands trembled uncontrollably, but he remained the only waking soul in the entire town. Sheriff Abram Harlow, who had fought sleep until his body collapsed under the force of that whispered command, lay beside him in the dust, breathing softly, eyelids fluttering with dreams not his own, the doctors, the marshals, the deputies, the townsfolk, all. The same. Only Silas remained standing. Only he had heard the voice and refused it. And now he alone stood witness to the final beginning of something ancient. Beneath the fields, the eastern sky paled. Horizon blushed with early light, and the dome of earth in the center of the wheat fields pulsed with a slow, impossible breath. Silas whispered to himself, "The third day. This is when it wakes." He could not remember where he had heard that thought, whether it was spoken in a nightmare or read in some forgotten text, whether it came from the voice below or from the frantic scrawls he had made in his notebook. But the knowledge sat in his mind, certain and cold. If the sleeper fully wakes, the town will not. None of them will. Silas stepped toward the dome of rising earth, slowly, trembling, each footfall sinking half an inch into soil that felt more like warm clay than dirt. The fissure behind him stretched wider still. The cracks in the earth spread outward like branching veins, but the dome, the heart of the disturbance, was changing. Its surface cracked. Soil crumbled down its sides. Warm vapor hissed upward in rhythmic bursts. Something beneath it, something vast, was exhaling. Silas stumbled as the hum deepened beneath him. He clamped his hands over his ears, but the vibration traveled through bone. Through blood, through thought. Then the dome collapsed inward, revealing a pit below. Not a cavern, not a tunnel. Pit of black loam shaped into a perfect circle, its sides unnaturally smooth, as if something enormous had twisted upward through the earth, like a worm through an apple. Warm vapor rolled upward in waves. The smell was unbearable, earth and stone and something faintly organic, like the breath of an animal kept in darkness far too long. Silas gagged but did not turn away. The pit was deep. How deep? He could not guess, but far below something moved, a slow, rhythmic motion, a rising mass. Not shaped like anything recognizable, not a creature, not alive in any sense Silas understood, more like a structure, a living architecture, a great bulge of pale, shifting mass beginning to rise. Silas fell backward in terror. He whispered, "Horse, no, it can't come this far up." The rising shape paused. The hum intensified. The warm air surged. The earth trembled. And the dreamers all across Barrows Hollow spoke with one voice. "Open!" Silas screamed. Silas fled, not out of cowardice, but because something in the voice below had turned its attention to him. He could feel it now, pressing against his skull, pushing gently against the edges of conscious, a lure, a pull, a promise. Sleep. The same word it had spoken before, the same word that had dropped Sheriff Harlow like a felled tree. Silas ran toward the church, the only place he felt he still had control of his own breath. He stumbled through the doors, slamming them behind him. The church was cold. Silent. The candles on the altar were melted to puddles. The pews filled with sleeping bodies, dozens of them, heads resting on hymn books, hands still clasped in prayer. He stepped past them. He climbed onto the altar, and he opened his notebook. Last pages were blank. Except for one message scrawled in handwriting that was not quite his own, a message written in dirt. Not pencil. Dirt. Just 3 words. "Don't look down." Silas staggered. Something inside him cracked. Because he realized deep in his bones that the message was not a warning. It was a command. Command from something that wanted him awake. Not asleep. Something resisting the chamber. Below. Something fighting the voice. Silas rasped. Who? Who wrote this? There was no answer, but the hum beneath the earth shifted. Silas crawled out of the church and staggered toward the pit again. Air was thick like steam. Not hot. Not cold. Heavy. Hard to breathe. Hard to stay awake. He blinked once, his knee buckled. The earth below pulsed in response. He blinked again. A soft whisper filled his skull. Join. Silas slammed his back against a fence post, forcing his eyes open. He knew that if he fell asleep now, even for a second, he would not wake again. Then from the pit, the mass rose suddenly. Violently. Not all the way. Just enough. Just far enough that its upper surface broke through the darkness of the pit. Silas screamed, because the surface was not stone. Not soil. Not clay. It was soft. Pale. Wrinkled like ancient skin. And it moved, not alive, but responding to the presence above. Silas staggered backward. God, help us. It's. He never finished, because the surface of the thing shifted, just slightly, and an opening formed. A single slit. Narrow. Dark. UNFA to HOMABL. Deep, like the opening of a giant eye, about to wake. Silas retched and turned away, unable to bear the sight. And beneath him, in the soil, something tapped once. A patient, ancient knock. As if to say, not yet. The awakening of Barrows. HOLOW at precisely 9:14 a.m. Something changed. The hum stopped. Not slowly, not dimming. It stopped instantly. As if a hand had snuffed out a candle, silence washed over the fields. Silas collapsed to his knees in relief. And then one by one, the dreamers began to wake. Martha Delling sat up beside her breadbasket. Elias Rudd blinked at the mill wheel. Thomas Hawley clutched the chalkboard. Children cried for their mothers. Doctors gasped in horror. Marshall screamed in confusion. Hundreds of people all at once gasped awake like drowning victims hauled to shore. Shrill cries filled the air. Confusion. Weeping. Panic. Silas staggered to his feet, tears in his eyes. They were alive. He had kept them alive for 3 days. Something beneath the ground had called to them, pulled their minds downward, fed on their dreams, and waited for the moment sleep would allow it to surface. But something stopped the arrival. Something. Or someone. The people woke. The hum died. The pit began to close, soil collapsing, inevitable as though a great body retreating back into a deeper place. Silas whispered, exhausted, go back to sleep. Go back down. Stay down. The pit sealed. The vapor ceased. The earth stilled. Barrows Hollow had survived. For now. By sunset, word spread that the entire town had woken without injury, though many felt violated, hollow, as though someone had rifled through their memories. Dr. Kincaid was never found. Sheriff Harlow, now awake, could not remember collapsing, only a voice commanding him to sleep. The county ordered the wheat fields quarantined. Investigators tried digging to locate the chamber, but the soil had hardened into impenetrable stone. Nothing pulsed, nothing hummed, nothing responded. But nothing grew in those fields ever again. Not a stalk. Not a weed. Just barren soil that stayed warm. Even in winter. And sometimes in the dead of night, travelers swore they heard something beneath the ground. Not humming, not knocking. Breathing. Soft. Slow. Endless. Silas Pritchard left Barrows Hollow 1 week later. He carried only his notebook. He spoke to no one. On the day he vanished, a note was found on his bedside table, written in trembling pencil. The land will never be done dreaming. And one day, it will dream us back down. He was never seen again. Some say he fled. Some say he went mad. Some say he joined the chamber willingly. But those who walk The barren fields swear that if you stand, they're long enough. If you listen in perfect stillness, you can hear a voice whispering from deep beneath the earth. We remember you.